No one remembered building the library under the lake. It wasn't marked on any map, and no locals spoke of it. Yet, when the water levels dipped unusually low during a long summer drought, a fisherman named Eli spotted what looked like stone steps descending into the depths near the shoreline. He returned the next morning with a lantern, curiosity tugging at him like the undertow. The entrance, still dripping with lake water, yawned open like a forgotten mouth. He stepped inside. At first, it was just quiet. Old, silent quiet, the kind that makes you feel like you shouldn't be there. The walls were carved stone, smooth and damp, with faded murals of ink-stained scholars and sleeping beasts. Then came the books. Towering wooden shelves lined the passageways. Thousands of books, untouched by time or rot. Eli reached for one, a thin volume bound in soft gray leather. As his fingers brushed the spine, a faint whisper slithered through the air. He paused. The whisper stopped. Curiosity won again. He opened the book and began to read. The words inside weren't in any language he knew. Yet, as his eyes scanned the page, meaning bloomed in his mind, half memories, half dreams. The air thickened. The whispers returned, soft at first, then growing, overlapping. He shut the book quickly and shoved it back. Silence returned. Eli should have left. But he wandered deeper. The deeper chambers had books that floated mid-air, glowing faintly. The air grew colder. A large reading hall opened before him, circular and domed, lit by no source he could see. A dozen chairs surrounded a single stone table, and in each chair sat a figure, silent, unmoving, cloaked in shadows. Their faces were hidden, but every one of them clutched a book. Eli stood frozen. One figure slowly turned a page. He backed away. But as he turned, the shelves behind him had shifted. The entrance was gone. The air pulsed once, as if the library had inhaled. Panicking, Eli rushed past the shelves, searching for stairs, for signs, for anything. The book seemed to hum now, vibrating softly. The whispers became words. Stay. Read. Learn. He shouted. I want to leave. Then return the story you took. He pulled the gray book from his bag. He hadn't realized he'd slipped it in. He placed it on a nearby shelf. The whispers hushed. The shadows receded. A narrow staircase appeared at the far end of the chamber, lit by a pale blue glow. Eli ran toward it, heart pounding. As he climbed the steps, the air warmed, the scent of earth replaced wet stone. He emerged blinking into the sun, coughing up lake mist. The water had risen again, the steps now hidden. Eli never found the library again. But sometimes, at night, he hears the whisper beneath his bed. One day, you'll return to finish the story. It was supposed to be just one night. Anna had driven 6 hours to visit her grandmother in the countryside, but a sudden storm forced her off the road. She found a quiet inn just off the highway, the Ashwood Lodge, half hidden behind tall pine trees, its sign swinging in the wind. Inside, it smelled faintly of lavender and something older. The front desk was empty until a woman stepped out from a side room. Her smile was polite but hollow. "Only one room left," she said. "Room 313. Anna glanced at the old ledger. No one else had signed in for days. Her room was on the third floor, at the very end of a long hallway carpeted in deep red. The wallpaper peeled slightly, and each door she passed had a tarnished brass number. 310. 311. 312. Her hand paused before the next. The brass plate read 313, but the numbers had been scratched, like someone had tried to scrape them off. She pushed open the door. The room was clean, if dated, floral curtains, a small desk, a creaky bed. A mirror hung on the wall opposite the window, taller than her and framed in black. When Anna glanced into it, she noticed something odd. Her reflection wasn't quite in sync. A second too slow. A blink missed. She laughed it off. Just tired, she thought. She laid on the bed and let the rain lull her toward sleep. At 3:13 a.m., she woke up. The room was freezing. The window was shut, but her breath misted in the air. The mirror across from her reflected only darkness, even though the bedside lamp still glowed softly. Then the lamp flickered. In the mirror, the bed was empty. She sat up quickly. Her reflection followed this time, but slower, like it had just noticed it was being watched. It smiled. Anna wasn't smiling. She stood and approached the glass. The air around the mirror buzzed, like a silent vibration. Her reflection tilted its head the wrong way. It raised a hand to the glass, and so did she, but just as their fingertips met the surface, her reflection's mouth opened wide. Not in a scream. In hunger. Anna stumbled back, heart racing. The lamp died. The mirror stayed bright. From within it, she saw the room, her room, but the bed was made, untouched. And on the wall where the mirror should have been, there was nothing. She blinked, and in that blink, her reflection stepped forward and pressed both palms against the inside of the glass. "Let me out," it mouthed. Anna grabbed her bag and bolted. The hallway was dark now, and longer than she remembered. When she finally reached the lobby, the woman at the front desk was gone. The ledger was open, but her name had vanished. Outside, the storm had stopped. Her car was dry, as if it had never rained. She drove without stopping, not even to breathe. Later, when she told her grandmother about the lodge, the old woman frowned. The Ashwood? That place burned down in 1983. Took the whole third floor with it. Anna never saw the inn again. But the next night, her bedroom mirror flickered, just once. And her reflection blinked, a second too late. Every night at 2:45 a.m., Nora woke up to check her window. It had started a few weeks ago, with a strange dream she couldn't quite remember. Ever since, something deep inside her insisted she look. Not out of fear, exactly, more like a silent warning. Like the way animals go still before an earthquake. Nora lived on the third floor of an old apartment building. Her window faced a narrow alley between buildings, where only the tops of dumpsters and the flicker of a single streetlight could be seen. The alley should have been empty at that hour. But it wasn't. Every night, at exactly 2:45 a.m., a man stood directly across from her window. He never moved. Never waved. Just stood still, looking up at her. She couldn't see his face, his head was always shadowed by the angle of the street lamp, but she could make out the shape of his coat. Long, dark, and always slightly fluttering, even when the air was still. At first, she thought it was a weird coincidence. Some insomniac neighbor. But when she mentioned it to her building manager, he frowned. That alley's closed off. Been fenced in for a year. Nobody should be able to stand there. Nora checked the next night. Same time. Same man. She took a photo with her phone. When she looked at it later, the window showed nothing but darkness. The man didn't appear in the image. She tried calling the police once. By the time they arrived, the alley was empty. Probably just a prank, they said. Put up some curtains. So she did. Thick ones. But at 2:45 a.m., she still woke up. One night, Nora decided to wait. She made coffee, turned off every light, and sat in a chair by the window. As the time ticked closer, her heartbeat quickened, not from fear, but from anticipation, like part of her had always been waiting for this. At 2:45, she peeked through the curtain. The man was already there. But this time, he lifted a hand. And pointed. Not at her window, at her. She stumbled backward. Her chair tipped. The curtain fluttered open. She rushed to the window again, but the alley was empty. That night, she didn't sleep. In the morning, she noticed something new, on the outside of her window, finger marks. 5 long smears on the glass, as if someone had dragged their hand across it from the outside. On the 3rd floor. Nora stopped looking after that. She taped the curtains shut. Slept with lights on. But the dreams got worse. She dreamt of the alley, endlessly looping. Of walking in circles, unable to find a door. Of the man waiting at the end, arms outstretched. Each night, he was closer. One morning, Nora didn't wake up on time. She overslept for the first time in weeks. She found her curtains undisturbed. The window closed. Nothing odd. But on her mirror, written in breath, were the words. "Thank you for letting me in." Marcus took the last train home every night, a tired ritual after his late shifts at the diner. The ride was quiet, almost empty, as the city's neon lights faded behind the windows and the hum of the rails soothed the weary passengers. Usually, only a handful of souls shared the carriage: sleepy students, night shift workers, or those with nowhere else to be. But lately, Marcus noticed something unusual. Every night, at exactly 11:11 p.m., a new passenger would board the train at the old station just outside town, the kind of place where the platform lights flickered and silence weighed heavy. He was always the same man, tall, thin, wrapped in a dark coat that smelled faintly of rain and cold stone. His hat was pulled low, shadowing his face so Marcus never saw his eyes clearly. The man never spoke or acknowledged anyone. He took the seat across from Marcus and stared out the window, his gaze empty and distant. At first, Marcus thought it was coincidence. Maybe a regular commuter with a strange schedule. But the feeling in the air when the man boarded was never right. A chill would crawl over Marcus's skin, like the weight of unspoken secrets settling in the carriage. One night, curiosity pushed Marcus to break the silence. He shifted in his seat and said softly, "Hey, do you live around here?" The man didn't answer. But a whisper slipped through the stillness, so faint Marcus almost missed it. It seemed to echo from nowhere and everywhere all at once. "Not anymore." Marcus's heart skipped a beat. The whisper sounded like a sad sigh, carried on the cold wind pressing against the windowpane. He swallowed nervously. "What do you mean? Where are you from?" The man's lips never moved, but the voice came again, fragile and distant. "The night I died. I missed this train." The air inside the carriage grew colder. Marcus wrapped his arms around himself, shivering. He looked closely at the man's face for the first time. His eyes were pale and lifeless, like glass marbles catching the faint glow of the overhead lights but reflecting nothing back. "The train, it took me away from the world. From life. And now, I am trapped in a loop, forever waiting." Marcus tried to speak again, but the words caught in his throat. Instead, he nodded, sensing the loneliness the man carried. Suddenly, the man reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small, old-fashioned pocket watch. Its silver face was cracked, but the hands kept ticking steadily. The watch glowed faintly, a soft blue light pulsing with each tick. "Time is a loop," the whisper said again, as if the watch itself spoke through the shadows. "And I'm stuck inside it, waiting for someone who will notice." The train slowed as it neared Marcus's station. The man stood and bowed slightly. "Thank you," he whispered. He stepped off the train into the darkness outside, disappearing into the mist curling around the empty platform. Marcus blinked, and when he looked back, the carriage was empty again. His phone beeped. It was exactly 11:11 p.m. He hurried off the train, the night unusually still and cold. Later that night, Marcus found the old pocket watch lying on his kitchen table, ticking softly as if waiting. He hasn't taken the last train since. But on some nights, when the clock strikes 11:11, the watch vibrates gently, reminding Marcus of the silent passenger still waiting in the endless loop, hoping for company. Lila had always loved the old farmhouse her family inherited, nestled between endless fields of tall grass that swayed gently like waves in the wind. The house was a living thing, creaking with memories, every floorboard telling a story, every shadow hiding a secret. Yet the attic, that dark, dusty space at the top, had always been a mystery she never dared explore. It felt alive with something waiting. One gray, rainy afternoon, wrapped in a thick sweater, curiosity finally won. With a flashlight clutched tightly in her hand, Lila crept up the narrow wooden stairs leading to the attic door. The hinges groaned in protest as she pushed it open, revealing a cramped room filled with forgotten trunks, cracked portraits, and dust motes floating lazily in the fading light. As she swept the beam of light across the clutter, a soft, almost imperceptible whisper floated through the air. It wasn't a sound exactly, more like a feeling, a gentle tug at the edges of her mind, an invitation. Drawn to a small, ornately carved wooden box resting on a rickety table, Lila knelt down and lifted the lid slowly. Inside lay a delicate music box, its once vibrant paint chipped and faded with age. Almost by instinct, she wound it up. The music box began to play a haunting, lilting melody, sweet, sad, and beautiful all at once. But with every note, the whispers grew louder, more insistent, as if the tune was calling something out from the shadows. Lila's breath caught as she realized the whispers weren't coming from the room itself. They seemed to come from behind the far wall, where a faint outline of a door was barely visible beneath peeling wallpaper and grime. Her fingers trembling with equal parts fear and fascination, Lila pressed against the wall. To her surprise, it gave way, revealing a narrow passage lined with thick cobwebs and the smell of damp wood. The whispers urged her onward, their words unintelligible but filled with urgent longing. She stepped inside, feeling the passage close behind her like a secret being revealed. The corridor opened into a small, dim chamber, lit only by flickering candles whose flames danced in an unseen breeze. In the center stood a tall, ornate mirror, its glass swirling darkly like smoke trapped within. Lila approached cautiously. Her own reflection stared back, but it wasn't quite right. The eyes were darker, deeper, and the smile twisted in a way that sent a shiver down her spine. Suddenly, the reflection moved independently, waving a finger, beckoning her forward with a slow, deliberate gesture. Frozen in place, Lila reached out and touched the cool glass. Her fingertips met an icy coldness that seemed to seep deep into her skin. The whispers grew into clear voices now, pleading softly. "Help us." The room spun wildly, the candle flames flickered and dimmed, and the music box's melody slowed to an eerie stop. When Lila blinked, the chamber was gone. She was back in the attic, the hidden door sealed tight as if it had never been. But every night since, she hears the whispers, soft, persistent, calling her name from somewhere just beyond reach. And sometimes, in the corner of her bedroom, she catches a fleeting glimpse of that dark reflection, waiting silently, always watching. Evan had always dreamed of living somewhere quiet, away from the city's constant noise and lights. When he found the old cottage on the edge of town, surrounded by dense woods and winding trails, he felt like he'd finally found his sanctuary. The house was worn and weathered, with cracked paint and creaky floors, but it held a strange charm. It whispered stories from its long past, waiting for someone to listen. On the first evening, after unpacking his few belongings, Evan decided to explore the attic, a dusty, forgotten room at the top of the house. The wooden stairs groaned beneath his weight as he climbed up, the air growing cooler and stiller. The attic smelled of old timber and forgotten memories. Moonlight poured through a small, cracked window framed by peeling paint. The window was peculiar, oddly out of place. The glass was cracked in several places, its surface dusty but strangely reflective. Evan sat beside it, feeling a strange pull as if the window itself was alive. Outside, the dark forest loomed silently, shadows shifting in the night. Suddenly, a faint tapping broke the silence. At first, it was barely audible, like a gentle knock from someone waiting patiently. But it grew louder, rhythmic, persistent. Evan's heart quickened. He leaned closer to the window pane. "Hello?" he whispered, his breath fogging the glass. The tapping stopped, replaced by an eerie stillness. Then, from somewhere beyond the glass, a faint voice, barely more than a breath, whispered, "Help us." Evan's skin prickled. He pressed his hand to the cold surface of the glass. The temperature dropped sharply, sending a shiver through his body. Slowly, shapes began to materialize in the misted glass, faces, pale and desperate, eyes wide with fear, mouths moving silently as if trapped in an eternal scream. Fear and sorrow washed over Evan. He stumbled back, the voices lingering in the air. Night after night, the tapping resumed, growing more urgent. The faces returned, watching him silently, pleading for release. Determined to uncover the truth, Evan searched local records and old newspapers. He discovered a dark history. Decades ago, a family living in the cottage vanished without a trace. Rumors whispered of a tragedy in the forest, of spirits trapped between worlds, bound by a curse. One stormy night, the tapping became frantic, echoing through the house like a desperate plea. Evan climbed the attic stairs once more, heart pounding. The window glowed faintly, bathed in an otherworldly light. He pressed his palm against the glass, feeling the icy cold seep into his bones. The faces appeared again, but this time they smiled, a sad, thankful smile. The voices whispered clearly, "Thank you, for remembering." The glass shimmered and cracked, releasing a warmth that spread through the room. The restless spirits were free. From that night, the window was just a window, silent and still. But when the wind rustled through the trees, Evan sometimes thought he heard a faint tapping, reminding him of the night he freed the voices trapped behind the glass. The old house at the edge of town had always been a place of whispered fears and dark rumors, a crumbling relic draped in ivy and shadow, where no one dared to linger after sunset. When Sarah inherited it from her estranged uncle, she was eager to uncover its secrets and start fresh, unaware of the chilling fate that awaited her. The first night, as rain battered the roof and wind howled through broken windows, she heard faint scratching noises coming from the basement. Armed with only a flashlight, she descended the narrow stairs, each creak echoing like a scream in the oppressive silence. The beam of light flickered as she scanned the damp walls until it settled on an ancient wooden door, warped and covered in strange, unreadable symbols etched deep into its surface. The scratching grew louder, frantic, desperate. Summoning courage she didn't feel, Sarah pushed the door open, revealing a narrow passage descending into darkness so complete it seemed to swallow the light itself. From the black depths, a cold breath brushed past her, carrying whispers that spoke of betrayal, blood, and vengeance. Shadows slithered along the walls, forming grotesque faces with hollow eyes that pleaded for release or threatened eternal torment. Sarah stumbled backward, heart hammering, but the door slammed shut behind her with a deafening bang. Panic surged as she fumbled for the handle, but it was locked, trapping her in a tomb of nightmares. Time lost meaning as the voices grew louder, their sorrow turning to rage, promising to consume her soul as they had claimed others before. Then, in the darkest moment, a single word echoed, clear and chilling, remember. Images flooded her mind, ancient rituals, a family curse born of greed and cruelty, a sacrifice forgotten by history but never forgiven by the spirits bound to the house. With trembling hands, Sarah traced the symbols on the door, whispering the words that might break the curse or doom her forever. As dawn's pale light seeped through the cracks, the door creaked open slowly, releasing her into the cold morning air, the voices fading into silence. But as she turned to leave, she saw in the dust beside her footprints not her own, small, childlike, forever trapped between worlds, waiting for the next soul to enter their prison. And sometimes, when the wind is just right, the scratching returns, and the house waits patiently for its next visitor, ready to whisper their name in the dark. The abandoned asylum on the hill had long been the source of whispered legends in the small town below. Its skeletal frame stood against the sky, windows like hollow eyes staring down into the valley. Locals avoided the place, speaking of strange lights and eerie sounds drifting from its empty halls after nightfall. David was a skeptic, a thrill-seeker, an urban explorer who saw the asylum as nothing more than a derelict building, a perfect place to test his courage. On a chilly October evening, when the sun dipped low and shadows stretched long, he slipped through the rusted gates with only his flashlight and a backpack. The air was thick with the scent of rot and forgotten memories. His footsteps echoed on cracked tile floors, each step stirring dust motes that danced in the beam of his light. Walls were scrawled with graffiti and peeling paint curled like dead skin. Somewhere in the distance, the faint sound of dripping water echoed, a slow, mournful rhythm in the silence. As David moved deeper, the atmosphere thickened, as if the building itself exhaled a breath of despair. He reached a long hallway lined with heavy iron doors, each with a small barred window. The flickering flashlight caught a glimpse of faces etched into the walls, etched or maybe imagined by shadows. His heart pounded, but he pressed forward, curiosity stronger than fear. Then came the humming, a low, persistent sound that seemed to vibrate through his bones. It led him to a locked room at the far end of the hall. On the floor nearby lay an old, rusted key, as if waiting for him. Hesitant but compelled, David grasped the key and inserted it into the lock. The door groaned open, revealing a padded cell bathed in dim, unnatural light. The walls were smeared with strange, crimson symbols, twisted letters and shapes that pulsed faintly like they had a heartbeat. The humming grew louder, transforming into a chorus of whispers, chanting words in a language that clawed at his mind, dripping with menace and sorrow. His breath fogged the cold air as frost began to creep along the edges of the metal bench inside the cell. The flashlight flickered wildly, then died, plunging David into an oppressive darkness that pressed in from every side. Panic surged as unseen hands brushed his skin, cold as ice. Then, from the void, a figure emerged, a gaunt specter with hollow eyes that reflected an endless void. Its voice was a rasp, telling tales of pain and cruelty, of experiments conducted by doctors who twisted human flesh and minds, of screams drowned beneath the walls, of souls shackled by torment, unable to escape. David tried to flee, but the cell seemed alive, walls breathing and tightening like a cage. His cries echoed unheard as the darkness claimed him, swallowing his light, his hope, his very being. Morning came, and the asylum stood silent once more, but the gates were locked tight, and the wind carried a new whisper, David's voice, lost forever in the shadowed halls, waiting for the next foolhardy explorer to join the chorus of the damned. The old mansion at the edge of the village was shrouded in mist, its silhouette jagged against the darkening sky like the bones of some ancient beast. For years, the townsfolk spoke in hushed tones about the horrors that had unfolded within those crumbling walls, but none dared venture close, except Mara. Drawn by a mix of curiosity and desperation, she crossed the threshold one cold autumn night, the heavy door groaning as it swung open. Inside, the air was thick with decay and forgotten memories. Flickering candlelight cast grotesque shadows across the peeling wallpaper, and the floor beneath her feet groaned with every cautious step. Portraits of long-dead ancestors lined the hall, their eyes seeming to follow her, accusing and sorrowful. As Mara ascended the grand staircase, a cold draft whispered secrets through the broken windows. She paused at the doorway to a room rumored to be the heart of the mansion's curse. Inside, dust covered everything, but the centerpiece was a massive, ornate mirror, its surface cracked and smeared with an unknown substance. As Mara approached, her reflection twisted, warping into a grotesque visage that grinned back at her with malevolent intent. Suddenly, a chilling laughter echoed through the room, surrounding her, pressing against her sanity. The mirror cracked further, and from its depths emerged a shadowy figure, its eyes burning with endless hunger. Mara stumbled backward, her breath shallow, heart pounding like a drum in her chest. The figure's voice was a rasp, a serpentine whisper that promised pain and oblivion. Panic surged through her as the room's temperature plummeted, frost crept along the walls, coating the once grand furniture in a deadly embrace. She turned to flee, but the door slammed shut, trapping her in a prison of shadows. Outside, the wind howled, carrying the mansion's cursed lament across the empty fields. Within, Mara's screams joined a chorus of lost souls, echoing endlessly through the hollow halls, a warning to all who might follow. The mansion remained silent again, waiting patiently for the next soul brave or foolish enough to cross its threshold, forever trapping them in its eternal nightmare. Deep in the woods outside the quiet town of Hollow Creek stood the remnants of an old sanatorium, its broken windows and crumbling walls swallowed by tangled vines and creeping shadows. No one had dared to enter for decades, but local legend spoke of the Whispering Wards, a place where the voices of the forgotten patients still echoed in the halls, calling out for release or revenge. Emily was drawn to the stories, a young woman fascinated by the paranormal. Armed with a flashlight and a recorder, she ventured inside one chilly autumn evening, eager to uncover proof of the supernatural. The air inside was heavy and stale, thick with dust and memories that clung like cobwebs. Floorboards creaked beneath her feet as she moved cautiously through the dark corridors lined with peeling wallpaper and rusted iron beds. A sudden chill brushed her neck, and her breath became visible in the freezing air. She pressed on, guided by faint murmurs that seemed to drift through the walls. In one room, she found a journal, yellowed and brittle. Its pages told of cruel experiments and desperate patients trapped in endless suffering. The entries became increasingly frantic, ending with a scrawled warning, "Do not listen. They are always near." Emily's recorder crackled to life, picking up faint whispers that grew louder and more desperate. She spun around, heart racing, but the hallway was empty. Suddenly, a cold hand brushed her arm, and a voice whispered directly into her ear, "You should not be here." Panic surged, and she fled down the hall, but the building seemed to twist and stretch, trapping her in a labyrinth of despair. Every door she tried was locked or led to rooms that warped and changed, filled with shadows that reached for her. The walls pulsed, and the whispers turned to screams, drowning out her own terrified cries. In a final desperate move, Emily smashed a window and scrambled outside, gasping for fresh air as the first light of dawn broke over the ruined sanatorium. But she was not free. The shadows lingered, watching, waiting, their voices now a constant echo in her mind. The Whispering Wards had claimed another soul, and the town of Hollow Creek was left to wonder if anyone would ever escape their haunted grasp. The fog rolled thick over Blackmore Cemetery, swallowing the twisted iron gates and tombstones like a hungry beast. Few dared venture here after dusk, but legend told of a restless spirit, the Lady in Grey, who wandered the grounds, mourning a lost love and seeking company in the cold silence. Nathan had always been skeptical, but the recent disappearance of his friend drew him to Blackmore under a moonless sky. Armed with only a flashlight and a stubborn will, he pushed past the rusted gates and stepped into the graveyard's choking embrace. The air was icy, filled with the scent of damp earth and decay. Every crunch of dead leaves beneath his boots sounded like a whisper in the suffocating silence. As Nathan moved deeper among the graves, a soft sobbing reached his ears, distant yet unbearably close. He followed the sound to an ancient mausoleum, its heavy door slightly ajar. Inside, the faint glow of candlelight flickered over cracked marble and dusty relics. And there she was. The Lady in Grey, her ethereal form drifting silently between tombs, eyes hollow yet filled with endless sorrow. Nathan called out, but she only turned slowly, her face a pale mask of grief and longing. The temperature plummeted, breath freezing midair. Her voice, barely more than a whisper, echoed through the mausoleum, "Will you stay with me?" A cold hand brushed his cheek, ice biting through his skin. Panic seized Nathan as shadows stretched and twisted around him. The walls seemed to breathe, pulsing with the lady's anguish. He tried to run, but the gates slammed shut with a deafening clang, trapping him in the cemetery's cursed embrace. His flashlight flickered and died, leaving him swallowed by darkness and the unending mournful cries. Days later, the townsfolk found his flashlight at the gates. No sign of Nathan remained, only the faint sound of weeping carried on the night wind. Blackmoor Cemetery waits still, patient and eternal, to claim the next lost soul who dares to enter its haunted grounds.